Hello and welcome once again to Red Gaming Tech. My name is Amata and today I'm bringing you something a little bit different, as there has been a rather interesting article posted by one Isaac Knowles on Game of Sutra in defense of the subscription-based model. Now, this actually come in response to the negative reaction to ZeniMax's Online's decision to have a subscription-based model for the Elder Scrolls Online. Now, of course, I have been one of those naysayers that have basically quoted the fact that pretty much every subscription-based MMO in the past few years has had to go free-to-play within a year or two, or even less than that. And there's three examples of MMOs that has happened to straight off the bat. There's Star Wars: The Old Republic, The Secret Worlds, and Lord of the Rings Online. And of course, there's a number of other subscription-based MMOs that have either just fell by the wayside or have been forced to go free-to-play or go for the freemium model. And of course, another example is Dungeons & Dragons Online, which you have subscription, but you also have free-to-play. Now, of course, they did have that from the beginning, and of course, that does represent a different option for MMOs, but it's just another example of a big MMO that does have the free-to-play options. Now, Isaac basically addresses several questions regarding the subscription model and raises some very, very good points indeed. Now, it's a rather long article, so I'm not going to read it word for word, but I'm going to discuss the key points, and I'm going to put a link in the description to the article if you guys want to check it out. Now, the three main criticisms that come from people such as myself that don't feel the subscription MMO model is relevant anymore is: 1. Subscriptions incentivize players to rush through content as quickly as possible so that they will not have to pay again next month. And as a consequence of that first point, keeping players engaged requires a steady release of content, which is expensive to produce and again gobbled up in a month's time. And number 3, subscriptions prevent game companies from being able to price discriminate. That is, everyone will pay the same price for access rather than being charged for how much they value that access. Now, of course, those are not all the criticisms that have been leveled at subscription-based MMOs, but they are the main points. Now, the first question that he addresses is: do subscriptions encourage players to rush through content? And the answer that he gives is some, but not all. Now, the reason that a large number of players have neither the time nor the flexible schedule necessary to effectively rush through MMO content is that a subscription game's average audience is in its early and mid-30s, and on average that same demographic is married or cohabitating, working full-time, and has kids. In other words, it is a group, by and large, that does not have a lot of free time, and they're only minimally able to relocate a significant number of hours from other commitments in order to play their games. Now, so basically he raises the point that it's more correct to say that subscriptions incentivize certain segments of the player population, that is, of course, the segments of players with more free time than the general population of mid to early 30s to rush through the content. So certain segments are important for revenues. And this leads very nicely into the second question, which is: do subscriptions require a steady infusion of expensive content to keep players engaged? Now, he does raise a very good point straight away here that I do actually agree with. First of all, the question, he says, should not be, was this content expensive to produce? Rather, it should be, did this content generate enough revenues to make it profitable? And that's actually a very good point. It's not really relevant how much it costs, as long as you get the money back and actually make a profit. So, for example, if you make a cheap piece of content that doesn't really offer any real special quests, or is not really worthwhile, if you just basically skimp and try to keep people interested with some throwaway piece of content, no one is going to keep subscribing for that. So that cheap piece of content could actually cost you subscribers and in the turn actually be expensive. So if you actually take the time and money to make a quality piece of content, whether that be a full-on expansion or just a normal patch for ads and more raids or whatever, if that makes players go, "Ooh, that sounds really good, I want to keep subscribing until that comes out," then you've done your job. The fact that it costs too much to make is not really relevant, as long as you actually make a profit because of the subscriptions that you will gain or keep, even because of that quality content. So quality content pays for itself. So essentially what he's saying with this particular point is you have to spend money to make money, and in that sense that is actually very, very true. And obviously when you're dealing with a large group of people who do not have huge amounts of time to be sitting there rushing through the content or playing for 6 to 8 hours or whatever at a time, if you're giving them low quality content, that's going to give them a reason to not subscribe, because, well, they have limited time, they have limited revenue to spend on games and other leisure activities. So in their mind, why would they want to keep subscribing if you're just providing them with low quality throwaway content? If they're going to keep subscribing, they want to be getting more bang for their buck, basically. And it's going to drive them away if all there is after they've done the main quests or whatever is low quality content that's just been thrown out. That's not going to keep them subscribing. That's going to drive them away and drive them to some other game that perhaps is more appealing for whatever reason. So it does indeed pay to spend more, because you are attracting those players who cannot rush through the game because they do not have that time. And of course, the players who can rush through the game, well, they will also be enticed to stay because, well, they might be more willing to come back daily for raids or whatever. That doesn't mean that high quality content is going to give them more reason to subscribe, or maybe even a reason to attract their friends who also play a lot to come into your game. Now he touches on the price discrimination issue. Now let's just get out of the way what price discrimination actually means. Basically, it's the practice of charging customers different prices for the same or very nearly the same product. If someone is price discriminating, it basically means capturing additional value from its consumers and converting that into revenues. And he says, quote, "The video game industry price discriminates all the time by, for example, selling standard and deluxe editions of games and consoles. Players that have higher valuations of what is essentially the same product can be induced to pay more for it. Price discrimination is quite frequent in the free-to-play market, especially in single-player games where players are unable to verify whether they are paying the same price as everyone else for a particular virtual good. Free-to-play games also discriminate between more and less devoted players." And he continues, "What about unlimited access subscriptions? Are they price discriminatory? 100% yes, and extraordinarily so. The reason goes back to the concept of cost per hour. Remember that while a player might pay $15 a month for access, the actual cost per hour depends on how many hours he or she actually plays. Thus, a player who plays 1 hour a month is paying $15 for that hour, while a player who plays 50 hours is just paying 30 cents for that same hour. The company has captured a higher value on the first player for their playtime." So say, for example, that a company, and this is of course out of quote, was to charge price per hour rather than per month. Say it's $1 an hour. You have essentially just lost $15 from that same player who is willing to spend $15 on that same hour. So you can see how this actually works out for the company with the different mixtures of players and play styles and the amount of time played. They are getting very good value for money from the people who do not have a lot of time because, well, they're paying the same price as the people who are playing several hours per day. And obviously the main point that seems to be forgotten in a lot of these arguments and against subscription MMOs, and of course this is again Isaac's point of view, is the fact that World of Warcraft exists. It dominates this particular market, and they're able to capture more value from consumers precisely because consumers will face a very high switching cost. And he says, quote, "Moving to Star Wars The Old Republic from WoW, for example, requires dropping a social network, buying a new game, learning a new combat system and lore, and so on. By contrast, it is comparatively easy to leave Star Wars The Old Republic or another MMO for World of Warcraft because the switching costs of doing so are low in a world where World of Warcraft style is foundational, and especially already have a social network in World of Warcraft." Now, of course, the fact that WoW is so dominant, of course, gives them more availability of funds, and they can pour more money into the game and make more higher quality content and give players a reason to go, "Oh, that new content sounds really good. Maybe I'll go back to the game, or maybe I'll give it a try." Or, "Oh, my friend's playing as well. That's a double win." And of course, gives them more ability to price discriminate, which we have addressed earlier. So he does actually raise some very, very good points regarding the defense of subscription models, and in all honesty, I hadn't really thought of these points that he's raised when I was naysaying the choice of subscription model for the Elder Scrolls Online. I was using that argument that I addressed at the beginning of the video, that a lot of subscription-based MMOs have been forced to go to the free-to-play model due to the fact that they just haven't got the numbers through the door to make it worthwhile. They've had to switch to free-to-play or the freemium model, and I've basically argued that the time of the subscription model is over. Now, I still feel that World of Warcraft is only the only real game that can really make it work. However, Elder Scrolls Online may be the exception to that rule. And why is that, you might wonder? Because it's Elder Scrolls Online. It is the first Elder Scrolls Online game ever, and it's got the Elder Scrolls name attached to it. that is of course a massive franchise, and the first ever online MMO Elder Scrolls game is going to be huge regardless of the subscription model that they choose. Now, when I initially did my reveal video quite some time ago that ZeniMax have chosen a subscription model for Elder Scrolls, I did get numerous people commenting saying, bad choice, you've just lost a customer, basically. Obviously I'm paraphrasing, but that is essentially the point of a lot of these comments that I received on that video. And it is a good point. A lot of people will be put off by it because of the points that I've already raised, that of course there's so many free-to-play games or freemium or even buy once and don't pay again games, for example Guild Wars 2, which is of course flourishing very, very nicely. So I do still think that those points do have to be taken into consideration when talking about subscription-based MMOs. However, Isaac has raised some very, very good points in the defense of subscription-based MMOs, and you can kind of see the logic more clearly now as to why a company might choose it when dealing with something as expensive to make and maintain as a MMORPG. Anyway, I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. What do you think to Isaac's points? And of course, as I said earlier, I will link it in the description if you want to give the full article a read. It's very, very interesting. I do suggest you do if you're curious about some of his points. I did miss some stuff out, but I've given you the key points and the gist of what he was saying. But if you do want to go give it a read, then please feel free to do so and hit me up with your thoughts and opinions. I would be curious to hear your general opinions on not only what he said, but my opinions and of course the subscription model in general, and what you think the future of Elder Scrolls Online actually holds in store. Anyway, that is me done for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.